Temperatures are forecasted to get down to a frigid -16 tonight, and I'm out here in the Canadian Rockies in order to test some new, potentially amazing winter camping gear. The new Sea to Summit Etherlite XR Pro sleeping pad, Zenvivy -5 sleep system, and 3 other pieces of gear I'm really excited about. My goal is to see if this gear can utilize new developments in technology and features in order to keep me warmer and, more importantly, more comfortable out in these winter conditions. I'm generally pretty uncomfortable on my winter camping trips, with my go-to sleeping pad, the Thermarest X-Therm, leading to soreness and numb limbs throughout the night, and sleeping bags just being too claustrophobic and not allowing me to easily shift positions while asleep. That's why I'm testing potential alternatives to those pieces of gear on this trip. As well, I'm going to be doing the final test for a tent that has the potential to be the GOAT when it comes to 2-person winter tents. The tent is the Tarp Tent Arcdome, and it claims to be a storm-worthy tent with 4-season design considerations. What has me really excited about it is that it's a true 2-person tent, which for me means that it can fit 2 25-inch wide pads side by side comfortably, and is a potentially bomb-proof tent that weighs half as much as a lot of the competition. I'm gonna get it all set up, and then we'll go over all the things I wanna test and really figure out with this tent while I'm on this trip. It's crazy, even though it's March, the sun's already starting to set. There's really 2 questions that I have when it comes to the Arcdome. The first one is, what are those 4-season design considerations and winter specific features that I really like with this tent? And then the second one is the big one, and that's, would I take the Arcdome out into the alpine, in the mountains during a blizzard? Do I think it'd be able to handle those kind of conditions with a ton of wind and a ton of snow? In order to address those 2 questions, I'm gonna talk about my experience so far with the Arcdome in some pretty extreme conditions, and then I'm gonna spend today and tonight really going over the tent, figuring out what those features that I really like are when it comes to being a winter specific tent, and then taking a look at what I think could be improved, and then answering the question, is it the GOAT when it comes to 2-person winter tents? Another piece of gear that I'm testing on this trip are these funny looking gloves. My buddy Kane told me about them. They have a waterproof outer and then a fuzzy inner, and I think they're gonna be super useful for doing things around camp, setting up my tent, putting tent stakes into the snow. Basically, anytime my hands are gonna be making contact with snow, having that waterproof layer is gonna be really nice, especially in the springtime when the snow is starting to get a little bit wetter, have some more water content in it. You really don't want your hands to be getting wet, because that's a surefire way for them to be getting cold. I'm gonna get my little seating area set up here, and then I'll get my sleep system set up, because I'm really excited for those 2 pieces of gear and sharing with you guys what the kind of innovations and technologies are that I think might make them game changers. The Sea to Summit Etherlite XR line is Sea to Summit's update to the Etherlite XT line, which I found to be one of the most comfortable pads ever, but it had issues with warmth and durability. With the XR line, Sea to Summit claims that improvements to insulation makes the pads sleep warmer and more in line with their R value when you're out in real world conditions. They've also claimed to improve durability by increasing the thickness of the TPU layer on the inside, which is the layer that makes the sleeping pads airproof. And then they've also made the weld points, which is the spot where I had a failure on my Etherlite XT. They've made them oval shaped, which Sea to Summit says increases the surface area of those weld points and improves durability. I'm particularly excited for the Pro version of the Etherlite XR because it has an R value of 7.4 and has the potential to be a comfortable, warm winter sleeping pad. With the Etherlite series, you have these dimpled lowered areas and then these raised areas which act as air springs, which are amazing for pressure relief. The improvement to insulation comes in the form of more reflective layers in order to reflect heat back to you. And that technology is hit or miss. With the X-Therm, it's implemented really well and works very effectively, but other pads have not implemented it properly, like with Big Agnes pads, and you end up being cold even though the R value of the pad is quite high. So my question with this pad is, can it keep me warm on snow in -15 degrees Celsius temperatures? And is it as comfortable as the previous versions of the Etherlite pads? In order to test those 2 things, I'm gonna do a good old-fashioned overnight sleep test. I'm gonna spend the night sleeping on this pad and then see how it does and report back to you guys in the morning. Based on my previous experience with Sea to Summit pads, I'm not completely convinced that the Etherlite XR Pro is gonna keep me warm tonight. So I did bring the X-Therm, and I'm gonna have that next to me, and I can inflate it if I do start getting cold, so I don't have a miserable night. There's 2 other new pieces of gear that are part of my sleep system that I'm testing out on this trip. One of them is also made by Sea to Summit. It's the down pillow, so I'm curious to see if it's able to keep me warm with the down insulation on top of it while still being comfortable. And then the other item is the Zenvivy Light Bed Winter Edition. Zenvivy claims that their bed systems give you all the benefits of a quilt and a sleeping bag. So you can stay warm without drafts and then also toss and turn underneath them and sleep comfortably. The winter bed is comfort rated to 5 degrees Fahrenheit and then limit rated to -5 degrees Fahrenheit. So this should keep me plenty warm on this trip, but I've never used a Zenvivy down to these temperatures, and some of the design features that make it comfortable could also allow it to sleep a little bit cold. The Zenvivy bed consists of a full-length sheet that goes over your sleeping pad, and then attached to the sheet is a big insulated hood that your pillow tucks into, and it keeps it in place really nicely. And then the bulk of the insulation comes from this big down quilt that locks onto the sheet via this flap and clips, and it really works well in order to eliminate drafts. This connection point only occurs in the top half of the system, and then the bottom half of the quilt is fully enclosed just like a normal sleeping bag or quilt. I've taken Zenvivy systems out in below freezing temperatures before, and I was warm, but I've never taken them out in temperatures quite this cold. And the big questions for me are, is the hood gonna keep my head warm? Is it sufficiently enclosed in order to do that? Is the neck cinch going to be able to block out drafts coming in around my neck and shoulders? And can the draft elimination system handle these kind of cold temperatures? Because when you're getting down to minus 15, minus 20 degrees Celsius, even a little gap can really cool you off. I'm going to do an overnight test, and then like with the pad, I'll let you guys know tomorrow morning how it went. I'm going to start melting snow in order to make water so I can eat dinner. I'm gonna have to take these gloves off because the dexterity is not great. They are keeping my hands warm and dry, but I can't really do like fine motor skill things like set up a stove and get it lit and everything like that. And as I get everything set up and melt snow, I'll tell you a little bit about my experience with the Arcdome in those extreme conditions I talked about. I've had the Arcdome out twice in pretty crazy wind. The first time I ever used it, the winds gusted probably to about 100 kilometers an hour, which is crazy. It was really buffeting the tent, and I wasn't 100% sure that was going to survive, but it did a very good job handling that wind. The second time that I had the Arcdome out in some pretty crazy conditions was when I was testing 6 tents out in a field. I was comparing them with winds that got up to 73 kilometers an hour. With that test again, the Arcdome did very, very well. It performed the best out of all 6 tents that I tested and really solidified it in my mind as a tent that can handle pretty much as much wind as you can really throw at it without getting into hurricane level winds. So as far as wind performance goes, the Arcdome is extremely solid. And then even when it comes to snow load, and that's the other question, if I was out in a blizzard, how would it handle a foot, 2 feet of snow? And when you push down on top, really, really solid, and that's with the door open. This tent has a lot of structural stability to it, especially when you start getting it fully guyed out. This should be a pretty interesting night. If my sleep system performs well, then I'm gonna be ecstatic tomorrow morning. Because like I said, I'm not usually comfortable when I'm winter camping, and if I could be comfortable and warm down to minus 20 degrees Celsius, or even minus 30 if I threw a synthetic quilt on top of the system, then that would be phenomenal and kind of a game changer. I'll also let you guys know tomorrow morning what I really like about the Arcdome from a winter camping perspective, as well as what could use improvement, because there are a couple things that I'm already noticing. And if you're interested in any of the gear that I'm testing on this trip, then I'll have links down in the video description. And if you're curious what my entire gear list is for this trip, then I'll have my Pack Wizard gear list linked as well down there. Wish me luck tonight, and I'll see you guys in the morning. Good morning. That was an interesting night. Temperatures got a lot lower than I was expecting. So let's jump right into it and start going over how my sleep system performed and how I slept last night. We're gonna start off talking about the Zenvivy winter bed. When I crawled into it last night, temperatures were minus 18 degrees Celsius, which is right in between the comfort rating and the limit rating. And at that temperature, with my base layers that I hiked in with, Alpha Direct layer on top of that, and then fleece layers on top of that. So a lot of layers, but not anything super thick. I wasn't wearing anything down. At that temperature, I was very warm inside of this, borderline hot. I probably could have taken some layers off at that point, but I knew that it was probably going to get colder over the course of the night. So I left the extra layers on just to hedge against that, which was a good call because temperatures ended up dipping down to minus 22 degrees Celsius, which is quite cold and colder than the limit rating of the Zenvivy system. It was also where its weaknesses started to show, particularly in those spots that I was worried about yesterday. The hood, and then the neck cinch and the kind of ceiling around my shoulders and neck. I was actually losing quite a bit of heat from my head, even though I was wearing a toque and then a buff kind of pulled up over everything. And I'm not sure if that's because the hood just doesn't have as much insulation as the rest of the quilt, or if it's because the hood is just gigantic, so there's a lot of air movement kind of happening in this area, and that's what's cooling my head off. I also felt like I was losing quite a bit of heat around my neck and shoulders, even though there is this cinch in order to kind of cinch things down around your neck and shoulders. There's no snap at the corners here, so it never really fully locks on. The system is designed so you tuck these corners up into the hood, and that's what's supposed to kind of lock and seal everything down. But I found that if I was shifting positions in those colder temperatures, I was still introducing some drafts. And like I mentioned yesterday, even a tiny little gap in the system can lead to a lot of cold getting in. So what ended up happening is that when temperatures were a little bit warmer, minus 18, I was able to move underneath the quilt and I was comfortable and I was warm. But as soon as temperatures got quite a bit colder, I had to basically stop moving around, because as soon as I moved a little bit, I started losing a lot more heat and started getting a little bit cold. So while I do think there could be some improvements with the hood and then how it seals around your neck and shoulders, I did take it below its limit rating and I wasn't freezing. I was able to sleep. I was a little bit cold, but comfortable enough. So I have to give props to Zenvivy. I didn't think this system would actually perform at these temperatures, and it did pretty good. For the pillow, it was okay. The down did provide a little bit of insulation, but as expected, my head was laying on the down and compressing it, so I did lose a little bit of heat from there. It also wasn't the most comfortable, partly because it's quite thin. There's not a lot of height to it. Maybe it's made for sleeping bags where you get a little bit of extra height because you're sleeping on the hood. And then I really found I was missing a curved notch in the pillow, which some of the other Sea to Summit pillows do have. And I think that is really nice when you're sleeping on your side or even on your back in order to kind of slot into the pillow. So while not the most comfortable pillow, it could still be a good winter option. It's quite lightweight at under 100 grams and does provide a little bit of insulation. If you pair it with the pillow lock stickers that Sea to Summit has, then you can actually lock it onto sleeping pads really nicely. So if you're using a sleeping bag and you don't have a pillow with a pad strap, then this could be a good option for you. For the sleeping pad, we'll start with comfort and then we'll talk about warmth. When you're dealing with winter sleeping pads, warmth is probably the most important thing, but I really was hoping for a lot more comfort out of the Etherlite XR. Interestingly, I didn't feel like I was as comfortable on the Etherlite XR compared to the Etherlite XT. And maybe that's because I haven't used the Etherlite XT in a while, so I'm gonna have to blow it up and compare these two pads side by side. But when I was laying on my side, I didn't feel like I was getting the pressure relief that I would expect. And even on my back, I wasn't as comfortable as I was hoping I'd be. My main theory as to why the comfort may not have been as expected is the dimples on the system. So like I mentioned, it uses a dimpled baffling system. And I kind of think that maybe the raised areas aren't as high as on the Etherlite XT, and that's what's leading to a lack in pressure relief. For warmth, when I first got on the pad, I definitely felt some heat loss through the pad, but I slowly warmed it up and then was pretty warm most of the night. That is until the temperatures got down to minus 22. And at that point, two things happened. First of all, the pad did lose some of its inflation level. The PSI dropped inside the pad, so I sunk into a little bit more. That increased comfort a little bit, but it also decreased the effective R value of the pad. So that, combined with the fact that the temperatures were just colder, led to me feeling quite a bit more heat loss through the sleeping pad in the earlier parts of the morning. I probably could have added some air to the pad and been a little bit more comfortable from a warmth standpoint, but I really wanted to test out the comfort at the same time. But even with that, I think I was hitting the lower limits of this pad for warmth, and that's around that minus 20 degree mark. So based on this test, it's not going to be as warm as the Thermarest X-Therm, and it's probably going to be more on par with a pad like the Nemo Tensor Extreme Conditions. And its ability to hit that temperature is actually better than I expected. I kind of thought that it was not going to be a warm pad, and that's why I brought the Thermarest X-Therm as a backup. So it's exciting to see that Sea to Summit was able to release a true winter pad that didn't weigh an arm and a leg and wasn't this gigantic like their previous version. And hopefully, once I get some more testing on it, I can determine that it is a little bit more comfortable of a pad. Maybe I just was sleeping on it weird, or my body's just in a weird state right now. But I am very hopeful because I really want a pad that's able to be comfortable and warm in wintertime. I did sleep with the Nemo switchback underneath it, which is pretty much the norm for me when I'm out winter camping. On to the Arcdome. We'll start off by talking about those winter-specific things that I really like about it. And then there's a few things that I want to mention that could use improvement before we talk about whether I do think it is the two-person GOAT of winter camping tents. The first thing that I love about this tent is its different pitching options. So it does come as a double wall tent. So there's an inner that you can get as either a solid or a mesh inner, and then a fly that goes over top. But because it's all attached, when you set up the tent, it all goes up in one pitch, which is really nice if it's snowing or if it's raining, you're not getting the inside of your tent soaking wet. I also like that versatility in that you can use it with a mesh inner or a solid inner. A lot of people have different preferences depending on what kind of conditions they're going out in, or you can leave the inner at home and use it as a gigantic 3 or 4 person tent with just the fly. That can be a great option for some people who don't mind sleeping on the snow and want to drop quite a bit of weight from the tent. I already mentioned that I'd really like the space inside the tent. You can fit two 25-inch wide pads in here and still have a little bit of space in the corner for gear. But something that the Arcdome does that I really like to see with winter tents is it has a lot of pockets that are above the floor. So you have two pockets right at the ceiling and then two big pockets on either end. And this is great for storing gear when you have two people inside of it because it does get a little bit tight and you do run out of floor space. The last good winter specific thing for this tent is its stormworthiness. There's a few different reasons why it's as stormworthy as it is. The first thing is the fly fabric. It uses an ultra TNT for the fly, which is just a really durable, rigid material and great if you're trying to deal with wind. It also uses a sleeved cross pole structure. So you have big aluminum poles that go through these sleeves, and the sleeves provide a lot of support for the poles. And the cross pole design is really good at creating a shape that dumps wind, but is also structurally sound. And then in order to support the frame of the tent, you have a ton of guyo points. And when you're dealing with a lot of wind, guyo points are really the best thing that you could have. Each pole sleeve has two guyo points in order to support it. And then each of the panels, the big panels on the side of the tent, have a guyo point in the middle and then a guyo point at the foot end. There's 16 guyo points total, and when you put them all out, this tent is really locked down and super secure. But if you're not dealing with a lot of wind like I am on this trip, then you could get away with 4 stakes or even no stakes because this is a true freestanding tent and there's just a lot of versatility with it. On to the things that I think could use improvement. First of all, this door, it's really tiny, it's low. If you're a bigger person, it's harder to crawl into. I don't find it the biggest deal from a getting in and out of the tent standpoint, but where I do find it annoying is the fact that the door of the tent, the zipper goes all the way up here, whereas for the inner, the zipper just goes to here. And where I find this to be the biggest issue is when I'm trying to get inside the tent and close it all up, I have to kind of reach up and around the door in order to find the zipper of the door in order to close it up. And that can be really annoying when you're wearing gloves, it's dark, it's cold. It can be tough to find that zipper, and it was definitely a problem for me on this trip. I also think Tarp Tent could improve some things at the corner ends of the tent. Really, there's 3 things that I have a problem with. The first thing is that the loops on the end of the guy lines are too narrow in order to use snow stakes with them from the factory. So you have to undo all the knots and then retie them in order to fit snow stakes through. And that's just a big pain in the butt. The second thing is that the sleeve that the poles slot into is really narrow. And when you're wearing gloves and it's cold, it's really hard to get the pole into it. And I struggle a lot every single time I set up the tent. Combined with that, I find the pitch of the tent is really tight. And when it's cold out, I have a lot of troubles just getting the pole to bend into the sleeve. And that's with having everything loosened off so that it's as easy as possible to get the pole into that little sleeve. There's a few other little things that I'm kind of nitpicky about, but nothing major. The final thing is that I do wish that with Ultra TNT, it was more like sill poly where you could just stuff it into the stuff sack. That's my preferred way to put a tent away in the wintertime, because having to fold up the fabric and then roll it up in order to put it away is just a big pain in the butt, especially when that material is a little bit cold and a little bit crinkly. So is the Arcdome the GOAT? And right now, I think it's more GOAT adjacent. There's definitely some room for improvement with it, but I do think that it's one of the best, if not the best, true 2-person tent for winter use. There's not many other tents out there that are at this weight that allow you to fit 2 25-inch wide pads in them. There might not even be any that can handle the kind of conditions that the Arcdome can. And because of that, I think this is going to be a really popular tent for a lot of winter campers out there. I was testing a lot of new gear on this trip, but if you want to see my go-to winter camping gear list, go check out this video right up here. It's all the gear that I've tested a ton and rely on in temperatures all the way from just below freezing down to -40.